Hi, Brenna.
Hi, Jenna. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm excited about this topic, like usual. I feel like we have a very punchy topic to talk about, and one that I know a lot of people out there can relate to, specifically for the ladies, but doesn't mean that the men have to sign off. I think it's learning for everybody, and probably every female has experience in the workplace at some point, or in school or whatnot, in places where we gather.
We're going to be talking about and tackling the subject of mean girls.
Mean Girls, yes. Since I'm like as old as dinosaurs, we're talking about work right now, and I've had some experiences with that. I think most of us have. So we're gonna dissect, we're gonna unpack, we're gonna talk. We've had pre-conversations going on, so we have some notes, and we're drinking tea.
Yes, because this is definitely a tea-worthy subject.
Yeah.
It's a little spicy, so we'll just kind of remind everyone that our opinions may be in this. We also may be playing devil's advocate for the sake of seeing both sides of the situation. So they may or may not match our own viewpoints, but that's the point of this conversation, is to unpack and see things from a different perspective.
Yeah, and if you have thoughts and comments, of course, put them in the description box below. If you're here for a second time, thank you for coming back. And if you want to subscribe, there's a button down there to do that.
Yay! Okay, let's get started. Let's get the suitcase out and start unpacking. What for you came up with this subject that made it so important for you?
Well, I have struggled in the work environment because I just hate to be like away from my life, and I feel like the workplace now, especially for women, is a necessity. Like, we're just thrust in there whether we want to be there or not. But most of us do. I really enjoy working. You give 40 hours, if not more, to work a week, and that's time away from things that I truly love, like my family. It's time away from things that I like to do because I'm a hobbyist and a DIYer, and things that I just really love doing. And when I have to work, it's like you can't take people's money for doing the things you love. You have to do what they want you to do. So it's a huge commitment. It's a huge sacrifice. It's a huge part of your life. It takes care of you. It's a necessity to do work these days.
It really is. It really is. A lot of us in the workforce, we didn't get into the jobs that we did just because we like the work we're doing. We also did it to earn income for our family, our dreams, our hopes, etc. So when we're in a professional environment, whether that be work, volunteering, or just any sort of situation where you're part of any institution or environment where you're going to have to work with other people and different personalities, it is very important that we recognize that we're coming into an arena with so many different viewpoints that ours are not always going to match someone else's. It's going to be different depending on where we are and where we're at. But I love what you said about it being a necessity to go to work. Because I think that it's really important, first of all, to recognize before we dive into the topic of mean girls at work especially, is that a lot of people feel stuck in those environments and those situations where they freeze in front of someone who may not like them or seems to be opposing them in one way or another because of their necessity for income or their necessity for that specific goal in mind, and this is the place they have to be to reach the goals that they want to reach. And when that happens, we do run into people. I don't care who you are, whether you're male or female, you're going to run into someone who opposes your viewpoint and wants to challenge your approach. And business, you would think we're all mature because we're getting into a working environment. So idealistically, you go to work and everyone knows their role and everyone does their job, and then you go home, you get your paycheck, and you have a good time. But what we do see happen more often especially in the workplaces now, especially in corporate America, you'll notice that people are almost in the survival of the fittest. You know what I mean?
Totally, yeah. It is, and it is directly linked to survival, earning income, being able to pay your bills, take care of your kids, maintain your household. Like, it is not surprising that is connected there because it is directly related to you being able to live and survive.
Absolutely. And so what you end up coming across are people who are very threatened by the idea of someone being better than them in a position, real or imagined. And what we end up with is opposing viewpoints and even some game playing and strategy that comes into play where you're either prey, right?
Yeah.
Or you're the predator. And you know, that is something that can be very different in your home life. You could be a very kind, nurturing human being where you're capable of compassion and love, and you can be a shark in business. You can be both. It's a place where duality is practiced most often. And this is also where you may find that a lot of issues come up for you that were there in high school. And I think that's why this topic is so important when it comes to mean girls. We're not trying to diminish women, but let's be honest, when we come down to our basic instincts, we go back to where we felt most insecure, and that would be in high school.
Yeah, and the mean girls, like the Regina Georges and all the like ones that we were bullied by, or maybe even were seen perceived as the Regina George to some people, that was like the testing grounds for this like social experiment, or what will be the social experiment for the rest of your life.
Yes, 100% agree with that. It is very interesting to see how this plays out for different people. I love to hear women talk about their experiences in the workplace because I find it interesting that there isn't a single woman that I know that hasn't had an instance where they're like, I think my female coworker is trying to sabotage me.
Yeah, whether even like intentional or not, I think I know in my case, I couldn't say if it was intentional or not, but I did feel like there was some sabotage based off of just her trying to be successful and maybe not giving like the support or guidance needed for me to be successful. It's almost like like you said, survival of the fittest. Like, I'm not here to do your job, you do your job. And like, not that I was asking for that, but it just came off like it felt sabotagey, like it felt like a sabotaging kind of behavior where it's like, well, yeah, I want you to be successful too, and I would like to be successful, but I'm totally not feeling supported or whatnot. But we'll get into some examples. Like I said, if you have some, chime in on the comments, and we're gonna roll with this.
Yeah, and let's unpack about the difference really fast between masculine and feminine when it comes to power struggles. Because I've talked to several of my male colleagues and then men in general in business. And a lot of men surprisingly told me that though their competition's there, it actually drives them forward. It's not a hindrance, because most of the time when it comes to that masculine energy, they're able to separate emotion from business. So they don't take things personal. And when a man outthinks them or outstrategizes them, they find a way to be better in business, and that is their natural that's their natural function. Where women are capable of this as well, it's not our normal or our natural function. Emotion is a key part of who we are, and it's very easy for us to step into our femininity in business where we take things personal. And I'm not saying that's everyone, so there's my disclaimer. I'm not saying every woman does this, but I am going to say that the majority of us act out of our emotions. We attach feelings and relationship to everything.
I'm an emotional creature for sure. I definitely like let my emotions run wild with me, and I think it's gotten me in trouble sometimes, and it's also been like a protective factor. So, we can talk about like the balance there.
Because it's necessary. It's very easy to go from one end of the pendulum swing to the other. We're saying, oh, I'm emotional, so now I have to be completely without emotion and just be void of it, come out of everything, just be void of emotion. That's not the answer either. But it is important to recognize when women are like, well, why do we have such a hard time in business this way where men don't have it? Men struggle just like we do. The difference is they're able to remove emotion in a way that comes a little bit more of a challenge for us as women, is knowing where to have emotion and where to remove it. So the reason I wanted to make that apparent first is because I'm sure we're going to have some one in the comments who says, well, men don't deal with this. Well, yeah, that's why we're talking mostly about mean girls in the workforce. And yes, there are mean men as well, but I will recognize that, you know, for the sake of our topic, we should really focus on why it's so hard for us as women to detach from emotion in business.
Yeah, because it's part of our emotional, like emotions are part of our physiology. So we're going to approach it differently. But I don't think this is a topic we were covering before we got on camera, but I don't think that women have had the luxury of being themselves in historically in the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
We've had to live in a man's world, and it's been a man's world. But like we just have a patriarchal society. It's been this way since the inception of the United States, or probably even further in other Western European countries. It is not easy for a female to be a female among men. So we've had to like take on these characteristics of a masculine energy, which we have, but it's really not been we have not been able to honor like our feminine core principles, or even gaslit because we're emotional, or like not level-headed, or labeled like not able to do business because we come at it from this like emotional space.
This is true. And I will also mention that, you know, when we have adapted that as women as truth, sometimes we miss out on our biggest strengths with being able to feel emotions. It's actually when used correctly, it's a hidden weapon in any business, is being able to have that emotional intelligence. And the emotional intelligence with timing, these are incredible tools to have at your advantage in the workforce. So when we are pit against each other, sometimes we forget our strengths and we turn them into our weakness, which creates mean girls. Because, in my opinion, and again, everyone has one, I think one of the biggest reasons we have mean girl situations where we have cliques in offices and loyalties and allies where we're all supposed to be one team, but there's teams within teams, and this need to pit against each other comes from an insecurity of not being enough.
Right. And then like it's almost a prize or a value to be able to like seek out the weakest link and get them out of the circle, or we don't want them on our team because they're weak. And so that creates exclusionary behavior, which can turn into other types of mean girls at work behavior. And I think to me it's a lack of understanding the value, the intrinsic human value of what somebody brings to the team, and also like a lack of being able to like truly teach.
Yes.
And change people, and not necessarily change them because we want them to be different, but change them to be like more successful in the workplace, not giving our teams the time or the space or the training needed to really take somebody who maybe isn't getting it, and mold them into somebody who gets it. Or even if they don't get it, like give them like an off ramp, like, hey, maybe you should try this job, or maybe you should try this job. We need your strength in this area, instead of just like pack mentality, bully them till they're out the door.
100%. And I think one of the things that is looked over is women in leadership. Let's talk about that, because I'm blessed to say that at the beginning of my career in my current field, I had nothing but female leadership. From the vice president to my director to my leader, they were all women. And the culture we built in our company was around relationship. We had found a way to recognize that relationship in business is important. Now, this is a female trait mostly, but men practice it as well. But it's creating that space of trust and intimacy in a professional environment that is specific, it's appropriate for a professional environment, to create relationships where trust is formed, where we can do business knowing that the best intentions of others is the goal, is to bring out success for everyone involved. The win-win-win.
The win-win-win. And I've had really good leadership, female leadership, and they take that approach and trust your team. like if they're insecure, manage it on the like in therapy or outside of the team, and they like bring just real true support and guidance. The teams that I've been on that have had that leadership, revolutionary. I cannot go back to bad leadership. I run from that like the plague. And it's because I've been blessed to have leadership of people who understand that when all of the team is thriving, it just makes them look like spectacular leaders.
Fantastic. Yes, the best leaders have that notion in mind. They're not looking for their own glory. They're looking to make everyone feel great and recognize their own greatness so that you have a team full of extraordinary people. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the best culture to work in, right? And I don't think we had that just because it was females, but because all of these women aligned with the same goal in mind, and that was to create more leaders. Mm-hmm. Right?
I just think the structures of leadership are really important because, like I said, a lot of the times these bosses get promoted because they bring some of these characteristics because strength is valued in this patriarchal work environment. But we we have to figure out a way to work together and be happy and support one another and thrive with one another, like around each other.
Yes.
So I don't know if it's through personal story, support groups, making friends with leadership, how to like address it, because like I said, in a lot of situations I ran from, well, I don't know if I ran from jobs. I felt like the more people laid it on, the more that I was going to like stick around and show them that I'm not going to just give up, but always keeping my eye out for like other opportunities and just like moving on when it's time, because sometimes you can't change the workforce or the culture. You just have to work, and then you get through it until another opportunity comes along to help you escape.
Yeah, and that brings me to a point where we bring in the spiritual aspect to work as well. Sometimes we will find these people at work that are overly aggressive and recognize that our vision doesn't match the culture of where we're at anymore. And sometimes when you recognize that the culture is changing and it doesn't match your values, it's time to start looking for a new opportunity. And I think where we as society gets stuck is we are so used to our lens and what we're seeing, and it can stress us out. We can be like, okay, I don't fit here anymore. I have to find another job. I have to just kind of put up with it till I find one. And we get stuck in the negative of what's not working. And it's so easy to get there. I've done it so many times myself. And I had 2 instances where I worked with 2 very different leadership styles that I'd like to just kind of compare a little bit.
Yeah, go for it.
Because my industry, without getting into it too much, I worked in 2 aspects of it. But I had 2 different types of female bosses. The first one interviewed me, and her main objective is, are you available between this time and this time, because this is when I need someone here. My skills weren't really that important. It was whether or not I had the time and the transportation to get where I needed to go. So I get the job because I'm qualified. I have my licensing at this point and all the things. And she decides that I'm worth it. She sees that I have a family. She has a family. So she sees some connections. The other women in the office seemingly get along with me. But when I get there, I'm just supposed to know the job. There is no training. She's like, if you want to learn, you have to sit in my office and watch me work. Well, this, it was a commission-based job, so that was really hard. I couldn't go out and make my own work. I had to do what she said to do, and I followed all of her instructions on what she said brought success. But I started noticing it didn't fit me at all. I'm like, well, I think I should be out in the public talking to people. I think that'll bring us business. And she's like, nope, I need you here, and I need you making these calls. You need to make at least 400 a day. Yes.
Oh my gosh, 400 calls.
400 phone calls a day to do this job. And the training was on the job. I just had to know how to do certain things, how to identify certain things. And I was expected to do it on the fly and make an extreme amount of money very quickly. This obviously wasn't working. I wasn't doing what I needed to do. It was completely against my own model, and I knew that. So it didn't work out. Eventually, we parted ways. I mean, the office culture, they didn't like who I was. When I did bring in business, there was this very heavy, I could feel the seething jealousy from my coworker. Anytime I had any praise from the boss, I could feel the sabotage coming in, where she would be asked to help me and check my work. She would take hours, if not days, to get back to me with what I needed to fix. And I knew immediately there was no chance of success here because she saw me as a threat. She was number two, and she thought if I learned the job, I would become number two. So rather than creating a culture where both of us became successful and now our boss had two heavy hitters, where one of us could take a day off and the other one could be, there to pitch in, the boss inspired a triangulation, which is a narcissistic trait, right? So it's just a toxic work environment where she pinned us against each other and enjoyed the chaos. Because of this, there was no chance of success.
Yeah. Yeah. Like some people really truly love and thrive. Again, I don't know if it's a personality disorder or just like, a victim of the circumstance, but they really enjoy chaos. And to me, I can't work in chaos. I'm a gentle soul. And to be fair, I've been a good employee, and I think when I was learning to be a worker, I had to figure out what even a work ethic was, and so I've been a good employee and I haven't been a good employee. I think now that I'm older and I'm mature, I know what being a good employee means. But, starting out working at fast food joints, being a receptionist in the 90s, where you were kind of just a piece of tail, that wasn't, I played into that and probably wasn't a great employee there. And I didn't have education until I was older. And so learning work ethic through those circumstances and, I struggle with depression, and so I had some spotty periods in my life where like choices went sideways, life went sideways. So I know when I was not a good worker, and I know the circumstances that made it, the work environment bad that didn't have to do with bosses. But when I did get serious, I got education. I'm lucky that I got a master's degree in clinical counseling and a master's degree in rehabilitation counseling. I got a very well-rounded education and felt like I could go into the workplace knowing what it meant to work hard, be passionate about something, and was very sidelined by, wow, this sucks.
Yes.
This is really hard. Because I at the same time, I felt I had grown and I had matured out of some of the like behaviors, not showing up to work, not, grown past some of that. And like I said, I had really high hopes of just going in and being successful. And it wasn't the lack of knowledge that was making me unsuccessful, but rather like being green to the whole work environment and how to like navigate
the new personalities, all of it. There's so much there. Yeah.
And so counseling is a very female heavy industry, and so I had a mixed bag. I had some leadership that was like really patriarchal and like that cutthroat female kind of energy, and I had really good support. So it was like really mixed, and mental health is a whole different field that has its own inherent problems, but it wasn't until I had a good boss that I mentioned her probably before in other podcasts too, that really showed me that teamwork make the dream work.
Yes. 100%. I think that was the transition for me, because when I left that job, it was funny because she was like done with me and I was done with the job. Like it was just both of us, and I could feel the squeeze that I wasn't welcome there. I could tell that they just didn't think I was a good fit. And when I left that job, I remember leaving feeling like it was the best decision I ever made, while also feeling like, well, here I am back at the drawing board. What am I going to do now? And when I interviewed with the next team, which was a polar opposite experience, when she asked, what do you need from a workplace? And I was very candid and honest as I said, I want to know what you need from me. I want to be trained the way you want me to be, so I show up the way you need me to show up. I'm a team player. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's what set in motion where I ended up becoming a leader in my industry, was the fact that I was willing to follow.
Right.
And that culture, what made me a leader, what made me go, it wasn't like, oh, instantly I was great at my job and did everything right. In fact, the opposite. I had months where and even, where it was just so, I struggled in the position. What kept me going, what made me get past that initial pain was that I was part of a culture where everyone wanted to see each other win. We practiced our art and our craft. We learned, we absorbed all the information we could about it. This culture was so tight knit and so strong, and it was based on relationship, that it didn't matter that we were quite literally in competition because our salaries depended on what we brought to the table.
Yeah. Yep.
We made each other better. We gave each other ideas. We didn't steal them. We brought them to the table every week, where it's like, hey, this worked for me. You should try this. Let me hear your pitch. You know what? You should change this. Whether it was men or women, it was a completely different culture that made us a strong unit, and we were growing.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's usually what you see in those kind of like team environments. Yeah.
And so that brings me to recognizing where Mean Girls are created. And that is when we come into it in an arena as if we're fighting competition. This is where we women have to recognize it's not a weakness, but it is a detriment when we allow it to be our primary function, and that is emotion. When we come into a workforce together, we have to recognize that there are broken people coming into the workforce as well. There are broken leaders who were not trained. When I look back at that first situation I was telling you about, what I didn't recognize then that I recognize now is when she told me how she became a leader in her position. She was thrown into it, kind of like I was in another situation, but she was thrown into it. No one gave her any training. She had to learn everything on the fly. And she was resilient enough to become a leader through that. She learned how to be the best version of herself and actually won a lot of accolades for that. Why I don't believe she was a good leader is because she expected everyone to go through what she did to get success. And in order to be a great leader, you cannot lead people the way you learn. You have to lead them the way they learn. You have to figure them out.
Lead them through their strengths. And I think that's a marker of like when you know you have a good boss who's like letting this person be strong here and letting that person be strong there and letting you like grow in your strength. Yeah, that's a good, that is true leadership.
Thank you. I say that because that's my leadership model. That's how I do it with my team.
Bravo, bravo. No, it really is the way to create winners everywhere.
Yes, because you're not looking. So a great example is with my current team and the team that I lead. Without, sorry, girl, I'm going to put you under the bus for a second. But one of my favorite people on my team, because I don't have favorites in general, but just my team is my favorite. Whoever's on it, I love you, right? She is very different than me. We have very different personalities. What she's comfortable with, I'm not comfortable with. And when I recognize that, we went out to have coffee to kind of just regroup, and I told her, what are your goals? She gave me her goals, and they became mine. And what I mean by that, in leadership in general, in order to be a great leader, you have to look at what your people are working for. What's their why? And my goal became helping her reach her why. What does that do? That gives productivity goes up. Her wins are more.
She feels supported.
She's supported. And when she tells me, hey, I need you for something, I show up for her. And I make sure I'm there for her. Now I throw in another personality into that mix of someone who is used to fighting for everything they have. They're not used to that support. When they see that support being given to that other person, immediately they're going back into their training, into what they've been conditioned to believe, and that's we're fighting and I'm the odd man out instead of I have an opportunity to be part of this big, giant, beautiful team. So you put that same person in leadership, and now they think, I need to pin this person against this person to get things done. And they start causing this manipulation that sometimes leads to revenue. But most often I have found that this causes mean girls in society, in everything, where women are starting to sabotage each other. And we're creating an environment where it's very volatile to work with women in business. I've had men tell me that I don't like to work with women in business because they make it personal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's part of our characteristic. We're passionate creatures, and I think it's part of that emotional body that we come to the table with. And it's hard to separate success and passion when you're like in the zone. It's almost like like it is almost like a competition. Like you're playing a game and you're just in it to win it. And I do think that it takes somebody with like bird's eye view to like help people get distracted when it's about to, like, when they're about to clash, like help them distract it, like a conductor, so that it all harmonizes instead of like having things overlap and like come crashing down. So you need like an awareness and leadership.
As I was mentioning with mine, I came from female leadership, just one right after the other, from the vice president to my position was all female leadership. Well, then we had a shakeup where we switched areas, and now I had a masculine in charge of our, the VP was a masculine, the, director was a masculine, and I still had my female leader. It wasn't the change in men that was the issue. It was the leadership style. It was the culture difference. The culture I'd come from was a together team thing. And I was entering into a culture where it was competition. They thrived off competition, which made some of my male counterparts who thrived off competition excited because they're like, yes, this is my arena. This is where I thrive. You're going down. And I'm really happy for them because they do really well. For me, however, I am very feminine in nature. And my strength comes from making others great. Well, it's one of the many ways I'm strong. But it's one of my favorites. I love to show people the greatness within them. So I no longer fit in this mold anymore because it was now a competition of numbers. And though my numbers were fantastic,
you just like weren't driven. It wasn't like part
it didn't
of your
drive
passion.
me.
Yeah, it
No.
didn't make you happy.
It made an inner rebellion come up where I was like, I'm giving you nothing because I know what I can make you, but you're trying to make me do this, and so now I don't want to. Almost like inner rebellion of pause of, I don't like this culture, change it back, or I don't do what you want. And how silly and arrogant is that, But I went through that myself where I had to ask myself, what's more important to me? The team that I was building or my ego? Hard place to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard when you're. It's hard. So as a person that struggles with depression, it's hard when my values don't align with those around me, and that's when I really find myself struggling at work because I don't want to go to work. I don't like the work. I really struggle like a donkey stubborn. Like I do not feel like going to work when I'm not passionate about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And if it's like competition and cattiness and heavy like drama, or even like if it's not all those things but maybe like a culture that I don't vibe with and everybody else does and I feel like the odd man out, I'm like I struggle. Yeah. I struggle. Really, really, like it hits me deep.
And there is this thing I used to tell a male colleague of mine was really struggling because he came from a salesman background, and he was like, how do you do it? He's like, how do you deal with this and that and the other whenever you're stressed out? And I told him, well, when I worked at my job where the culture was awful, I would wake up in the morning with a stomach ache. I did. I woke up with that tense feeling of, I have to go to work. I have to go to work. I have to deal with these people. And I would stress about it. And so what I would do is I would always do these, the things that I do for spiritual reasons to get out of that stress. But I had to arm myself all the way there, prepare for the day, and that was exhausting. And that was my cue to recognize I needed to leave. Because if you're waking up in the morning and your first thought is clench the stomach, stress, you're not in an environment that you can thrive.
Yeah, you're gonna make yourself sick if anything. If like physiology tells us anything about like stomach issues, cortisol levels, constant stress, and that can be like those low frequency stressors, constant, not like one big event. Those can be just as damaging and traumatic as like big large events. And I hesitate, like I'm not definitely not going there with like PTSD or whatever, but it is a type of trauma when you're forcing yourself to do something that doesn't feel right, and that like brings out these anatomical symptoms.
And can we just unpack right now a truth that a lot of people are going to find controversial, but I find we need to talk about, and that is the lie that this job is the only one you'll have. It's the only one you'll get. You have to continue because if you don't, your family's going to fall apart.
Yeah.
It's a lie that forms and grows within us to give us reasons why we can't escape or leave toxic environments, especially in work, because we're looking at our bottom line and we convince ourselves and even block ourselves into thinking there's a better opportunity out there for me. We can't see that because in our minds we've spent so much time and invested so much of ourselves into this one position. We blind ourselves that there might be something better out there.
It's so hard though, like with the way the economy is right now, and like I've been there. I grew up in poverty. I saw my mom struggle like to pay bills, and she got called terrible names like welfare mother, and this was like the 80s, so when the like welfare mom was like popular in politics and things like that. Even going to get like assistance and stuff like that, she was always met with like, well, why don't you just get a job? Well, she was in theory working in school to get a job, but it wasn't a job that like just anybody was paying, because she was a single mom, so framework there. It wasn't just that she could go work at the like minimum wage job and make it. She had to do something that was going to bring in twice the income. So with her, she struggled in learning nursing while accepting this government assistance, getting like dirt on her face for that based off of like other people's opinions, to get this job that would pay enough for her to like do both mom and dad jobs. And it sometimes we don't have options. Sometimes it does feel like you're up against a no-win situation. So, gotta make space for that. And, we do live in a land of opportunities. So sometimes it is buckle down, struggle for a little bit, and make the opportunity for yourself, because that is one of the benefits of living where we live. Like it's going to be hard, you might struggle, but you can go out there and get education. A lot of the times trades are supported through like workforce development programs, or you can take assistance for a while you get yourself through the situation, and then go back out there and get into the job that like really you've worked hard for. But sometimes it's not so easy, so I get that part, and it's a struggle, and I get that, and I honor that, and we can't stay stagnant either. We have to keep pushing forward.
100%. That is a powerful statement that you made there, because I think we forget that a lot of the time, is that it's the personal why.
Yeah.
I think I think that goes, we were talking about culture, we were talking about, single moms. And I think that one of the things that really sticks out for me, one of the most powerful things that we forget about is people's why. As a business consultant, which is part of the job that I do, it is not my main job, but it is part of what I do. One of the things that we need to ask each other and ourselves is, what is our why? What is it we want to see accomplished? Because when you're in any sort of work industry arena, the reason why we have these mean girls, these women who come in and attack, is because they have forgotten their why. And you become their competition. And the silly thing about that is we can't compete with each other because our whys are different. I am a single mom with a lot of kids. I have a basketball team and an alternate living with me, right? Like, that's how many kids I have. Put that together. And the point of that is that when I started in my business, it was the same thing. I had to drop a lot of pride as a single parent. My kids needed what they So understanding the why in business is so important because, as you mentioned with single parents, as a single parent, one of the things that I had to learn, and it is the art of acceptance. And what I mean by that is when you have a very specific goal in mind, your why are you working? What is your goal? What is it you want to see from your time, energy, resources spent on this career? What are you looking for? What's your end result? When we talk about leadership, we take it back to leadership. One of the things we look for in leadership when we're trying to hire a team or when we're looking at people we want on our team is we're looking for people who want a different life, because those are the ones that are going to work hard. What are they looking for? It's not a monetary gain alone. It is a different lifestyle. Those are the ones that are going to put in the work, because there's a different life they're looking for, and they want to create that. And you are a stepping point on that journey to get them there as a leader.
Yeah.
Your job is to help them recognize their greatness, where they shine, so they can shine for you, but also so that they can achieve their why.
Right.
Mean girls are created in work when they forget their why. They no longer remember that they have their own goals and focus, and you become competition because they think that you're standing in between them and their goals when really you don't even have the same goals. It's not possible. And these mean girl situations are created where sabotage comes in, where they try to stop you because they need to get ahead of you. So I think part of that navigation that you were talking about, that acceptance point, that radical acceptance, that not everyone's going to have the capacity or the ability to see past their insecurities in business. Accepting that that is a fact, that you're going to run into these people. It's important because it doesn't end in business.
Yeah. And I would add to that, like, knowing that that's out there, it's a danger, and you're vulnerable because you need income, right?
Yes.
Always positioning yourself as marketable, as necessary, as valuable, and I think that keeping one job in before you find another one is always good. Show that you're a good employee even under difficult situations,
That
even
you'll still
under
show
bad
up.
bosses. Yeah, like you're going to be there on time. You're going to, work hard. Stay out of the drama, even if it's a super toxic, dramatic environment. And then, just look for your opportunity to off ramp into something more fit for you. But
You said a lot of really important things there that began with yourself. You notice how you didn't say you sabotage that woman. You strategically place yourself into an area that gets them back. You look for ways to hurt them in business. No, none of that is present in what you said. It's
Right.
all about self-awareness and positioning yourself and what's going to work for you and your why.
right, and like opportunities to grow, because I, in that younger, immature phase of my life, I would be like, I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to quit and I'll find a job. But I always found that those big pauses in between work really did damage to me. Like, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you working right now? And that did have a lot to do with me. Like, maybe that was in the period of where I was not a very good employee, and I couldn't show or have anybody speak to my ability to like handle situations that were difficult, or show up on time, or just even keep a job because I needed a job. Because there have been times in my life when I didn't need a job, so I didn't have a job.
Yeah.
But now it's shifted to where I think continuity in the workforce is really important. Even if you have a difficult boss or catty females around you, it's important to know yourself in the workforce, because you may be among mean girls now, but that doesn't mean that all workplaces are like that. And you have to like keep looking for that boss that's gonna shine like you're talking about.
Yeah, you're looking for culture. It comes more than a leader, because if you are the one that's attacked by these mean girls, I firmly believe, and again, this is my opinion, that the reason you experience so many of those mean girls is because you're meant to be a leader.
Yeah, or like know what it's like to be on the other end so that you don't necessarily get into that leadership role and do the same damage that's been done to you. And that's
Exactly.
like, stopping cycles and breaking, bad behavior and having awareness to know that like this is what makes people shine. Um, because it is really crappy to see. So, personal story here. I am a very open person. I'm the same on camera as I am off. I don't like really have the work persona versus like the personal persona. I'm like me to a fault. Like to
Yeah.
a fault. Like in 90s slang, still like talking about boss coffee and like boss this and boss that. Like using like cool dude and like I'm just me from like I got stuck in the 90s for some reason and I'm just like
Girl, I'm a 90s girl. Let's just call
I
it what it
I
is.
roll like that on and off camera, and
Yes.
it is the same in the workforce. And I will open up about myself to like probably a fault. And it's been really, really crappy when I like find that I find somebody and I'm just open with them and they turn around and use that information against me because they've perceived my openness and my like consistent personality as like weakness. And and it's made my life uncomfortable, but it's also shown me that I just don't fit in here, and
Yeah.
it's okay. I need
Yeah.
to move on, and it's not even bad against them. It's just that work is something that I find necessary, and if it's going to be something for me, it has to fit me.
Yes. And I agree with you on that because I think that it's it's almost a bit pressuring to be someone different in business. And what I find is that the things that I thought were keeping me back in business are my biggest strengths. And that is the ability to be authentic wherever I am.
Yeah.
I'm not going to change who I am to fit the culture, but I have had to learn how to mature. So, a good example of that is as a leader, you're always growing, but you don't grow by seeing other people's mistakes when you're a leader. You grow by seeing your mistakes as a leader and where you fall short. And one of the ones I did was I had a hard time masking my feelings at a meeting. And I'll tell you, such a toxic trait. But when they would say something that I didn't agree with, I should have kept my mouth shut. But I found myself going, or outwardly processing things like, that's not how I built my business. That's not what I do. And, having a great leader above me, she was, my leader was able to pull me aside one day and say, I noticed that right there, that thing you just did when I mentioned, this new person's name. I saw that in you. And I was like, oh, here it comes. I'm going to have to be very honest about how I feel about this situation. And we had a talk about the new culture that was being built here. And I realized immediately that I had two choices at this point. I could either try to learn this new culture and adapt to it and bring my powerful leadership skills and my culture into it and marry them, so to speak, and enmesh them and create a whole new culture that might even be better than what we had before. Or I could gracefully, slowly back out of this culture and find something that fit better for me. Now, what I choose is irrelevant. The fact is that I recognize
Awareness.
I have a choice.
Yeah.
And that is what gets you out of that victim mentality. That's what gets you out of that loop of I don't have choices. We have choices, we just don't like the way they look. So an example of that, we talked about the single mother who was like, I don't want to be on assistance. I have to do this. I have to do that. I came to a realization that I don't have to do any job if I want to make income. I can make any income I want working any job if I'm willing to sacrifice time and certain things. So the lies that we have to shed in order to accept this radical acceptance that these people exist, that these situations will exist, is our power to get out of them by willing to do things. And a great example of this, again, I will say, as a single mom who had to work multiple jobs to get the credentials I have to be in the position I am now. I could have stayed on assistance. I could have stayed working 3 or 4 jobs, but my goals were so much bigger than that, that I chose to sacrifice little things and little, things that seemed big for me back then. But now looking back at them were not that big of a sacrifice if I looked at it that way. But also looking at what I wasn't willing to sacrifice. Being at the job before this one where the culture was terrible, where the boss liked
The chaos.
the chaos and pinning people against each other in that toxic environment, I was not effective at home. I was tired all the time. I never had energy for my children. I didn't have energy for myself. And I was just dying slowly. So if that sounds familiar, I'm not telling you to leave your job. I'm telling you to take a look at that, observe it, and ask yourself, am I in a place where I can thrive, or am I dying slowly? And do I need to find myself an exit strategy where I have something else lined up? Do I need to realign my goals and professional and personal life so I can have a better environment?
Yeah.
It's a red flag.
And sometimes it comes with sacrifice, because I had to find an environment that worked for me recently. Well, I mean, let me put it this way. I was at a job that I really, really loved. It was like a career job. It had good benefits, good pay. The culture wasn't great, but I could have stayed there and, really thrived, probably changed the culture eventually, but it was a lot of like things that I had to put up with. But the pay was really good. And I had another opportunity that came along that was less pay, but it was more aligned with what I wanted to do. And it didn't mean the opportunity wasn't there, but it did mean that I had to take a really big sacrifice in order to like get the things that I wanted. And so I think you have to like weigh that, the pay was less, but it aligned with my values, and it was one of the best choices that I ever made to make less pay. And I know that's not a luxury that everybody has. And I kind of didn't have it at the time, but it's just the way like the universe was aligned that I could take advantage of it. So I did it, and it's been one of the best decisions of my life. I have a really good job. It is the job that I think that I could stay at, but it takes personal sacrifice sometimes. It takes reflection of your values and a little bit of luck.
I love that you say that. You're bringing me into my favorite saying that I say to all my clients in my other job as a healer, as a listener, as all the things. And that is, what are you willing to lose to gain everything?
Yeah, I think there is that sense of like, this is a leap of faith. You have to like take your own destiny into your hands with like a little bit of faith that it's going to be better. And then also just like maybe trusting yourself, like, well, I made this change, so if it's not better, I know at least I have change capable inside of me, and I could like do this again.
Yeah, so thank yourself for those mean girls, because what they're doing is they're showing you something. Whether you know it or not, it's valuable information.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's showing you where you are too sensitive and you need to have some tougher skin. Sometimes it's showing you where you have allowed something that is not good for you to become a norm in your life, and you need to shatter that illusion and open yourself up to what's really there, and accept that this is not where you belong. It is hurting you physically, spiritually, mentally. You're exhausted. It's causing disruption in how you thrive at work and at home. And that acceptance that there is a problem is very hard to come across. But sometimes we run into those people, that culture, that toxicity, because we need to see that if we continue down this road, that's where we're headed.
Right.
Especially if that's the leadership. If the leadership is, I want you to fail so I look good, or I want you to produce so I look good, then that's going to lead to you becoming exactly that. That's
Right,
the leadership
exactly.
you're going to become. And you're going to see it first in your house. You're not going to see it in your working environment. You're going to see it at home. So I always know as a leader at home, because I'm a mom, right? You're a mom.
Right.
I can tell what type of leadership I'm in work when I look at how I am as a parent. If I'm a dictator-like parent, you're going to do as I say because I said so. I know that I'm in a bad culture at work, and I need to regroup and look at the lessons I'm learning. If I am coming across as, let's talk about this, let's work together, this is what you did really well, this is where I want to see you improve. When my systems are in place, like we talked about with busy moms, going back to that podcast, if I'm able to follow those systems and things are working well, and my attitude is things aren't where I want them, but they can improve, I know that I'm adapting to a culture at work that's good. Because here's the facts, ladies and gentlemen, is that when we're at work, we give most of our time, as you mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, is that we spend hours and hours of our time at work, and we're sacrificing all this time away from our family. What are we bringing home from that culture? And is it more costly to stay in an environment where we are creating a toxic environment at home than it is to actively put our work and time and effort into finding an environment that we fit and thrive in, and recognizing when it's us that's the problem and not the environment? Because it's very easy to convince yourself that you're not the problem.
Yeah, and then that leads to like being the sour apple, you know, like maybe you're the one that is constantly causing the chaos because you're griping and, you know, complaining. And it's like, well, if you're complaining so much about it here, is causing a ripple effect into the workforce, whether you acknowledge it or not.
Yes.
And there's no greater feeling to me. And I mean, obviously, like I said, I've been a good employee, and I've been a bad employee, and I've been an immature employee, and I've been a maturing, growing, learning employee. And there is no greater feeling than being proud of your work.
Yes.
Proud that you get up every day and go to a job where you feel like you're making a difference. And you're getting your she power because you're like making it in this patriarchy work, and you're finding your stride as a female. You're gaining your independence through like financial stability. You're gaining your clout by just hanging in there and like managing through the mean girls at work, and you're making it to like a place where you just feel happy. And maybe not every day, right? Not wake up tired and stuff, but at least happy for the most part that you're doing something valuable.
Yeah. And being able to say that too is knowing when to walk away. I think that's braver than sticking things out as well. Because if you notice those cracks, if you notice, oh, this isn't working, and you are being very honest with yourself, and you're making the changes, and you're trying to adapt, and you're realizing this is not helping, if you take that time to put that energy into looking for your next step while still doing your job function, you'll find that avenues open up for you never thought even existed.
Yeah, there's been times I went into like the classified ads and I'm like, this is the job. Like, I feel like this job is calling me. And I put in for it and I get the job, and it's like maybe not the perfect job that, there's this stuff going on, mean girls at work, but even if the culture isn't aligned, it's like I'm learning something here, I'm gaining something here, I'm making allies here, I'm getting like a job. What is that? The person that speaks on a reference. I'm getting a reference here because they see my value in this person, and then you can just use this as like a stepping stone into the next best thing, and I think that it's really important to not fall into the victim mode of these things or let it defeat you, because there's always something else out there. And honestly, you never know unless you try, and you never know unless you put yourself out there in a way that like you may not get the job.
Right.
But you might get the one that you really like. You might not get the job. You might not get the job you want, but you might get the job that's perfect for you.
Exactly. And that even goes into volunteer work and everything else. As being, part of a nonprofit, I will tell you, I thought that for sure in nonprofit work there would be no competitiveness, right? Because we're all there to serve people without getting paid. Like, that's the big deal.
Yeah.
Like, we're volunteering. So my job as a leader, your job as a leader, because we're all leaders in some way or another. The facts are the facts. If you have a family and you're a mom, you're a leader. If you're a family and you have a dad, you're the dad, you're the leader. Our jobs as leaders are not to stomp them down and show them who's in power. How do we know who a true leader is? A true leader knows how to follow, how to serve.
I think a true leader knows how to trust.
Yes.
A true leader knows how to build on perceived weaknesses, because I truly believe that perceived weaknesses are strengths.
Yes.
Because it's not about sameness in the workforce anymore. We don't want everybody to be the same.
Not
If
anymore,
everybody
no.
does the same, you're just going to get minimal output. But if you understand that this person's weakness is maybe another person's strength, you let that person be strong, and this person, you find out what this person who's weak, you find out what their strength is and let them grow in that. But if there's been a culture that people are replaceable.
We are.
It's profits above people. It's that which I run from. If that's the ethos of the company, I'm like, wow, like get me out of here, because my heart, my soul, my values is always people above profits. I think if you put your people above profits, they're just gonna produce for you, and the money will just be there. Productivity is like quality, no
Yes.
shortcuts. And learning, like teaching people, we want quality instead of production.
Yes.
And I think that you may have the outliers that really linger in those things, but most of the time people want to do a good job, and they want to show the pride that they have in their work. So those things just take care of themselves. And for the most part, the majority of your team are going to be outputters. You just might have they're going to be producers. You just might have to do extra coaching or something with those people that are just not, you don't want to kick them out. You want to help them grow.
And usually they're the ones that take the longest to build extreme wealth are usually the ones that have consistent wealth. They're taking the time to form their craft. You know what I mean? So when they produce, they're producing quality. They're learning what brings quality. They're learning those things. So it's going to take them longer to have bigger, lasting results, but they're usually the ones that have the most powerful impact. And whether that's monetary or whether that's ideas that produce, other ways of business that bring success, whatever that is, you have to help people find that in themselves. So when we come across these bosses that are the mean girls, when we come across these colleagues that are the mean girls, what we have to do is detach from who they are and what it feels is personal, and kind of make it personal within ourselves of what we see. Like, okay, so this person feels like they're attacking me. Fine, that's about them. But where can I improve my boundaries? Can I live with these changes? Where can I change where I'm putting my energy, where I'm putting my attention, and where can I put it back into making my work better? So when I teach people to come on my team, for instance, and they ask me, do you compete with other teams? I tell them the truth. No, I compete with me. Who was I last year? What was I good at my job at? Where am I not good at my job this year? Where do I need to get better? How do I beat the girl I was last year at my job and be a better version of me, right? Yeah. Forget the other people because they're not on my journey. At the end of the day, when it comes to retirement time, I'm not going to remember Joe Schmo who did the same job as me and made it so far. I'm going to be like, look how far I came, or look how far I didn't come. I wish I would have taken that risk. I wish I would have done that. So, this topic is so powerful because we specifically have it in the female form when we say mean girls.
Right.
Men can be mean girls too. I've seen it. I've seen the psychological effects of men trying to make other men feel inferior. And, men are very results driven. Whereas female, we're more about connection driven. So if my business is going to be run different than your business, if you're a man, right, you're going to be looking for extreme numbers to prove your worth. Where I'm like, look at all these people I've gathered. Well, my Kalasar, so to speak.
This is an interesting topic because I feel like the mean girls, the quote mean people at work are in my rearview mirror now. I really do not. There might be one or two people that I just, there's weird stuff happening around the workforce, but I feel like these people or these archetypes that have really made my life miserable are in my rearview mirror.
Yeah.
I know how to navigate the waters. I know how to communicate in the workforce. I know how to see something and be like, hey, you raised your eyebrow when I said that. Did I offend you in any kind of way? Lean into weird conversations. And if it's not okay in that workforce, I either make it okay or I know how to move on. It's
Beautiful.
not something that I worry about anymore. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say that, because I still do worry about it a little bit, because it is so, like, if you've lived through it, it's so terrible. Like, you definitely don't want to, like, ever go back to it, but you become better at navigating and creating a workforce or a culture that is okay to, like, address odd stuff. And I'm fortunate, I work in counseling, rehab counseling. They're all very, like, feely, people-centric kind of professions. Not to say that numbers don't drive those business, or the business model of those, but you can get away with putting people first. And even if you're having issues, you're like, well, I'm doing this because I feel this way about this person's success.
Yeah. I love that you mention, how after dealing with those situations that you recognize that they aren't even part of your present anymore. Like their influences, what you went through is absolutely driving part of your force forward, which means going back to what we were talking about earlier about them having some valuable information and observation of where they're at helps you really see where you're at as well professionally. And I think that we need to recognize that that mean girl's persona comes from being in an insecure place, and we have to accept that we're all capable and probably have been the mean girl in the situation to someone without even realizing it.
Yeah. Be open to feedback. Yeah.
Yeah.
Communication, that looks like communication, that looks like safe spaces, like let your people around you feel how they feel, honor their feelings, validate them.
And be impeccable with your word.
Be impeccable with your word. Oh, I love the 5 agreements. You're getting that from there. Yeah. Be impeccable with your word. Be very intentional. Be very humble. I think people, like I mentioned earlier, perceived weakness is perceived as weakness, but it's actually really a strength. And if you come off benign, people might think, oh, well, they're weak, they're not going to do anything. And that's not the case. It's not that you're not going to do anything. You're just going to come about it in a way that's going to, like, disarm, discord, create a space for communication and resolution. Not many people are ready when you're like, well, let's work it out. Let's figure it out. Let's, like, get to the bottom of this and figure it out. Because we have such a high conflict society and a lot of conflict in the world right now. But I find that it's so much less energy to, like, just talk it out and work it out than really fight it out.
Yes, and sometimes we don't realize that if we give someone the space to figure it out, they may decide this is not for me and they may walk away, and that can be hard. But a lot of times, when you're willing to stand up for someone else, when you're willing to be that authentic, safe space, that you're willing to offer that space, you find that you have that more often. And it gives you the courage to walk away from things that don't serve you. As a leader, I came into this terrified. Like, how can I lead people? I'm scared. You forget as a mom you're leading all the time. And I thought the fact that I lead with a maternal instinct of wanting to see others great was a detriment. Like you said, I thought it was a weakness. I didn't realize the strength that comes, because this is what a man told me, by the way. This is coming from a masculine leader. Is he says you're not a leader until you have learned that your greatness comes from the greatness you inspire in others.
I love that.
Right?
Yeah, that's powerful. That's really powerful.
Yeah, it's very powerful. I have never faltered from that. I've definitely made mistakes. I've definitely fallen off the path of what that means. But what it's my compass now is recognizing you don't have to be in the history books. If you helped write them, you'll know. That should be enough.
Yeah, and I do think that, and this is me coming from a long life lesson of learning how to, like, manage depression, but you really have to align with your values. You're not going to change the company if it's not inherently aligned with your values. You might be able to make some changes here and there, but you have to find a profession that you really feel passionate about. Well, I do, at least. Speaking as somebody who, like, battles with, like, motivation, depression, I have to be, like, I have to believe in what I do. I have to feel like it makes a difference.
Me too.
Getting out of bed when you have depression can be really, really, really hard. If you're not getting out of bed for a reason that really, like, gets you inspired to do so, man, it's going to be a long day, a long week, a
Yeah.
long year, a really, really difficult time at work. So, if it takes education to become a music teacher, if it takes education to become a doctor, a counselor, or whatever, if that's your path, channels will open up to pursue it, and you might have to make sacrifices here and there. You might have to, do a job that you don't like to do, or be on services that you don't like to be on. But if it's meant for you, there is a way for you to do it.
And the working with those toxic, in those toxic environments and with those toxic personalities that are not going towards progress, they're going towards domination. Believe it or not, you can learn so much from those people, because some of the things that drive them towards that toxicity can be used for that culture you want in business, in your life. I will take a couple of those things from that first toxic boss that I've taken into a better environment, and that was her ability to write everything down. She just wrote everything down, and marked it off. She didn't rely on technology to remind her when she had something to do. And so I adapted that to what I do now. I learned from her. It wasn't just, oh, she was toxic and I learned nothing. When I look back at her systems, the things she did that made her strong, whether she knew it or not, she was teaching me the whole time that you can be successful, you can be a star, you can be the greatest at what you do, and it doesn't matter if you're squashing all the talent that's following behind you. And that is the lesson that makes me a better boss every single day, because I'm no longer trying to be a boss babe.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be a boss in the industry. I want to be a leader. I want to create women and men that can lead and have a powerful impact on the community. And I can't say that I would be that same person if I hadn't seen a boss woman, a woman with all the accolades, a woman who had made a name for herself teach me that I wanted nothing to do with that if it meant I had to stand there alone.
So I would challenge everybody that's listening to this right now to really take inventory on what it is that you want in your life to manifest in the workforce. Because I know that I want to just be myself. I maybe not, right now I'm not getting paid to be me. I'm getting paid to do work for somebody else. But one of the things that really makes me happy is just being able to be me, because I know inherently I love seeing people succeed.
Yes.
I love being a goofball. Mm-hmm. I love being somewhat informal, professional, but sometimes informal, you don't have to come to the meeting with a tie. You can come comfy as you want to be. I just love looking into people and seeing their greatness and helping that grow. So I trust myself in so many situations that I just don't feel like I need to be somebody else to help people do the best that they can. I come to the table with just me, but I am like a package of all of the things that I just mentioned. So I would challenge everybody out there, especially if you're in a position where you're like, oh, I'm trudging through day to day. One, my heart goes out to you for that. But also maybe do some self-reflecting, do some internal value seeking, card sorts of whatever you can find to help you identify what's important to you. Yeah, sorry we had to do a puppy pop. I would challenge everybody to do that internal reflection to find out what is it that they value in the workforce and what is going to bring them joy, and go for it. Align with it and bring that intention to a reality.
I agree with you on that. I think that's powerful. And also, I would also challenge people to be the change you want to see in the workforce. When you're in a position where you feel powerless, what can you gain from that? Where do you see a need for change, and where can you be that change? Before I had the position I'm in now, before I even had that one before that, I worked in a place that I wasn't happy in, and I wanted something different for my life. So I did my best at that job that I hated, that I didn't want to be at anymore. And I worked as if I already had the job I wanted. 2 years later, here I am living that job, and there I can feel a shift happening. Who knows where I'm headed next, or if I'll be at this job forever till retirement? Who knows? I'm not putting myself in a box. I thrive when the box doesn't exist and I walk around other people's boxes.
Yeah, totally. Same. Build a life that you love. Rise. Trust yourself. Grow your strengths. Grow the strengths of others around you.
And don't settle.
Yeah.
Don't
keep
settle.
growing. Keep going.
The job you're in now may not be the one you want long term, but there's still something to learn there if you're still there. And if it is time to move on, then I highly challenge every person to do their best job possible, even if you hate your job. Because when you do get in that next job, that's just subpar for you, doing your excellence. You know, being in your excellence is just going to be status quo, and people are going to rise to meet you there rather than you starting off complaining and being bitter with your other job. It's just like dating. You don't get into another relationship while you're still in a relationship. You take that time to heal it, right?
Best practice, yeah.
Yeah. So if you get into a new job and you're still carrying that weight, you're going to be bringing that into this new culture. Oh, well, that person was terrible. And they're going to be like, at first it's empathetic, like, yeah, I get it. But eventually you're going to have to let that other job go.
Yeah.
The bitterness, the resentment you had, the anger you had towards the toxicity. You can't take that into a healthy environment, so you have to be healthy.
So with that, we wish you health. We wish you growth.
Wealth and happiness.
Wealth and happiness. Yes. And thank you for spending time with us as we talk about this subject and we unpack mean girls at work and watch them fade into the rear view mirror.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments, especially. Raise your hand if you have been the mean girl. Raise your hand if you have been the one that's victimized by Regina George. Whatever it is, would love to hear how you overcame it. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining Brenna and Jenna in this beautiful discussion about work and where we can thrive as women. And for the men that joined us and played along, we appreciate you as well. We hope that you gained something from this, and we will see you next time.
See you next time. See you on the next one, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.